Hello everyone. I'm going to give you a brief overview of my curriculum project design chart. So, my course that I wanted to create was Residential Imperial Band. I'm really confident in creating this curriculum because I'm actually a middle school band director. So, the concept I chose was to design and implement effective differentiated instruction for initiatives to enhance the musicianship and expression of individuals in a band environment. So, I'm just going to give you a brief overview. So my learning outcomes. So I listed my first outcome as uh, students will be able to demonstrate an understanding of blend and balance. Number two would be to understand and execute the different tonguing and slurring techniques such as staccato, legato, attack, release, along with interpreting basic conducting patterns. Number three, extend their dynamic levels and ranges suited to the lesson materials in grade 4-5 literature. Number 4. Examine the expressiveness of musical notation with a reasonable level of precision and detect musical phrasing that communicates natural tension and release. And 5. To determine the most effective approach for reading correctly shaped phrases with increased musical awareness. So the two books that I implemented in my curriculum design consist of first the Standard of Excellence Book 3, which is the Green Book by Bruce Pearson, and Concert and Contest by Boxman. Both of these method books are can be used for band, particularly in my experience. I would use the Red Book and Blue Book for beginning and intermediate band, and the Green Book by Bruce Pearson, or Standard of Excellence by Bruce Pearson, for advanced band. So, so the content. So I created a 12-week lesson of what students will be learning. So I'm just going to give you a brief overview. So week one, students will start reading out of the Standard of Excellence book, page 2. B flat major scale is what is intended. So during that first week, they'll be going over examples 1 through 3. Some activities that included consist of ear training, um, which helps with blending and balance in the band, especially if they're playing. Also, another listening activity for the Standard of Excellence book. So, Smart Music is a software that instrumentalists are able to use. It helps with intonation, rhythm. It helps them keep a tempo. So, that's a really good software for especially the young musicians. Older musicians is good too. And activity, also a group discussion. So, I would actually have my band discuss on how we can improve balance. So, blend and balance. And at the end of the first week, I would have students take a formative assessment on within the Standard of Excellence Book 3, example 1, 2, and 3. I would also implement, I would discuss practice logs. So, but the very next week, practice logs will be due, and the performance, that will be their performance assessment. Week 2. Week 2, we will go on to continue with page 2. It will be example 3 and 4. So we would continue with other activities such as a warm up. Uh, Normally, I would start my band with a warm up, so that wouldn't necessarily be their activity. So, but we would be able to implement warm up activities within the band to help with those particular with blend and balance. So and another activity would be music jeopardy. It's very imperative that all students understand the basic fundamentals of music, such as notes and rhythms. So we would play games to enhance their minds. And at the end of the second week, I would have students take a performance assessment on examples 3 3, 4, and on page 3 would be example 5. So week 3 would consist of the concert and contest collection by Rubank, repertoire study. So they would start on page 3. So for the content, I would have them go over measures 1 through 17. I wouldn't necessarily have students start at the beginning and play all the way to the end. So I would break it down into segments for them. So the activity, I would have student demonstrations, especially those strong individuals who are able to really zone in on their practicing, listening. That has to reflect smart music. That's what we use. Sectionals. I would break the sections in the band into sections, so that way those particular sections can work on those harder parts. And a YouTube video, so students will be able to listen to that particular performance, and I will have a questionnaire for them. And at the end of week 3, their practice logs will be due, which has to be signed by their parent and their student. This would be considered, and they will also have a performance assessment, which will be performance assessment 3. Week 4, we will go into, we'll continue with on page 3. So then, instead of, they will continue with on page 3 in a concert contest and collection. So they will go to start with measure 17. So that's where they will have left off the last week. So 17 to measure 32 with repeats. The activity I would include would be a music theory worksheet, long tones. I would actually have students hold out a note as long as they possibly could, reflecting the game. So, and rhythm exercises, because it's good for students to understand how to keep a steady rhythm. And at the end of week 4, they will take a performance assessment. So week 5 would consist of repertoire study on page 4. So I would actually have these students start from measure 1 all the way to 19. And then the activities I would include would be note identification worksheet. So basically, I would go through this all the way through 12 weeks, so that way students understand what I'm looking for, how I'm looking for, and you know, just developing as a band. So my learning outcomes are rational for sequence. At this stage, pupils or students will be able to demonstrate and create a mature tone quality with vibrato at different degrees of loudness. This includes the capacity to listen to the general tone and modify it to match the ensemble as a whole. Rationale number 2. This stage will focus on the understanding of articulations and styles for the genre of music they are performing. Rationale number 3. This stage will extend on finding the right balance with other students in an ensemble to produce the desired group sound with emphasis on dynamic levels. Rationale number 4. This stage will examine the expressiveness of sound with the section and tonal quality structure of the ensemble, as well as demonstrate the capacity to produce harmonious dynamics in connection to the ensemble and individualized performance. And rationale number 5. This stage will determine the most efficient method for students to play music in a variety of time signatures, key signatures, genres, forms, and periods at their proper grade level. So continuing on, I'm going to give you a mini lesson. So within my lessons, I would always have even in private lessons, I would always have them, I require them to have a 3-ring binder, more like a notebook, and a number 2 pencil. It's always good to write in music in pencil. So Start with the Standard of Excellence Green Book by Bruce Pearson. So, normally we would start on page number 2. So there's several examples. So I would have my students play, not just play, but we will think about our attack. That's our initial syllable of what we do use to play that particular note. So if I'm playing, I'll play the warm up for you. So it's their initial attack. So we would first play our scale. Always in lessons, we always start with our scale, then we would go right into our method books. So another example I would have my students do that I implemented in my design chart. Within our first week, we would go through example number 2. So I'll play just a little bit of it. So that's just a little example that I would play out of the book. So we will go over uh, posture, tone, technique, and musicality that coincides with musicianship. So, and within this standard of excellence, we would actually discuss the style, the key signatures, styles, and then the interpretation that the composer is asking for. So, in my design chart, I go all the way up to page 4. Oh, I go all the way to page 5. Sorry about that. I go all the way to page 5. So, next, I'm going to be playing an example out of the Concert and Contest collection. Even though it says for flute, this book is written for all instruments. So this is why I would use this in my imperial band. That's why I incorporated it in my design chart. So the first week I will have students play through measures 1 through 17. Once you get to 17, there's a repeat. I would actually have my students identify their key signature, their time signature, and the articulation markings. Within this first piece, it starts out in their dynamic markings. So that's why we definitely work on blend and balance, attacks and releases, and all other techniques, staccato, legato, and interpreting basic conducting patterns. So this particular concert piece is in cut time. Okay, so I'll just play just a little bit of it. So I will go through with my students. How can we interpret this piece the way it's supposed to be played? So we can play a little softer in the beginning because it does have a P, which stands for piano music. So softer. So I would explain to my students that playing staccato, every note needs to sound short and separated. You can play staccato, but I want you to interpret it as if I'm playing each note the same, because one staccato note can sound a bit different than the next staccato note. So it's always important to play the note exactly the same. So then we would move on to measures 17 to the end. So this also has a repeat. You play all the way to the end, and then you play all the way to the beginning, and then measure 16 where it says fine. I'm just gonna play a little bit of measure 17, and a little bit so on to measure 25. hmm So there's actually a repeat at measure 24. So there are markings at the top of the note. So I would explain to my student, this is a greater than less than sign with a tenuto sign. So I would have them attack the note but play it elongated or as long as possible. So give it its full value. So, but you go into measure 18 with a slur and then a tongue. So really signify what you're reading and how you're playing. So I'm gonna play those two particular measures. So it says forte, just really does loud, as loud as I would have them play. So I'll play one more time. hmm So then you have the same exact lick at measure 19 and a little bit measure 20. You have 16 followed by eighth notes. So we will really break these, um, the simple melodies and the concert pieces down in segments. So that way when we put it all together, it fits like a puzzle piece. So I always express to my band, it's important not just to play through the notes, but to understand what you're playing, um, execute different tonguing techniques that will help, such as staccato, legato attacks, releases, along with interpreting basic conducting patterns. Also, I would like for my students to extend their dynamic levels and ranges suited to the lesson materials and grade, um, 4 and 5 literature. So, understanding the dynamic levels. So, and the other piece to this puzzle would be to determine the most effective approach for reading correctly shaped phrases with increased musical awareness. So be aware of what you're reading, how you're reading, your musical expression. So this will all, these interpretations will come over time. That's why I was able to develop this particular design chart for the 12-week lessons. So thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed. Have a good one, everyone.